Breaking news, ICE and FBI raid senator's office in Washington, D.C. 2 tons of drugs seized. Now let's get into the details.
Entered and executed a system of justice against La Casa Nostra.
What happens when the heart of American democracy becomes the crime scene of the century? What does a nation do when the marble corridors meant to symbolize stability instead reveal the deepest cartel infiltration ever uncovered inside the U.S. government in Washington, where power usually shifts in quiet negotiations and guarded whispers, the morning shattered like glass. At 8:47 a.m. overhead, lights flickered violently above the Senate hallway, an omen, a warning, a rupture in the illusion of order. Moments later, a roar of boots and shouted commands turned stillness into chaos. For the first time in modern history, federal tactical teams stormed the Capitol not to defend it, but to seize one of its own. The raid unfolded with battlefield precision. According to early Reuters and BBC Updates agents from the FBI and DEA moved as if confronting a foreign threat, not a sitting lawmaker. Staffers dropped folders, phones froze mid-dial. Capitol Police hesitated before instinct finally caught up with reality. And at the center of the shock, Senator Marcus Hale, a man long celebrated as a national security hardliner, was slammed against the wall not by political opponents, but by the very agencies he claimed to champion. Inside room 312, the truth spilled out literally. The steel cabinet did not contain sensitive policy drafts or classified committee reports. It vomited bricks of fentanyl heroin stamped with cartel insignias and vacuum-sealed stacks of cash totaling over $11 million. Al Jazeera and DW later confirmed that officials described the seizure as unprecedented in U.S. legislative history, the kind of discovery expected in the hideouts of foreign narco commanders, not the office of an elected senator. Beside the narcotics lay documents far more combustible transport authorizations, clearance codes, and internal memos, proof that the breach was not external. It was engineered from within. As global outlets, The Guardian and Defense News noted the symbolism was devastating. While President Donald Trump publicly doubled down on national security in 2025, insisting that America's borders and institutions were being hardened, the Capitol revealed a threat no border wall could stop. Corruption had not slipped through security, it had held the keys. The operation behind the seizure, known only to 9 federal officials, had unfolded in near-complete silence for 14 months. What Americans thought were routine military convoys across Arizona, New Mexico, and Illinois were in fact shadow movements tracking the backbone of a $14.7 billion narcotics pipeline. Every shipment passed with a signature Hale 17A. Every inspection that should have occurred never happened. Every checkpoint that should have flagged the cargo was quietly bypassed. The balance between national security and civil trust began to collapse the moment those fingerprints entered federal custody. If a senator, someone sworn to protect democracy, could command a narcotics empire inside the Capitol, what other vulnerabilities had gone unnoticed? What blind spots had been normalized? And how much of America's strategic prestige had been eroded without a single shot fired? Strategists quoted by Reuters framed the event not merely as a political scandal, but as a test of national resilience. If internal guardians fail, external adversaries take note. Russia, China, and transnational criminal networks have long studied U.S. domestic cohesion as closely as its military might. A breach like this sends a message far beyond Washington. But beyond the geopolitical tremors, the human impact weighs heavier. Families in Chicago who buried children lost to fentanyl would soon learn that the drugs were approved with the signature of a man walking freely through the Capitol's secured doors. Communities in Phoenix that suspected manipulation of pursuit logs would discover those suspicions were justified. Americans who trusted their government to protect them were forced to confront a brutal reality. Vulnerability had grown at the very center of power. As the dust settled and the nation struggled to process what had happened, one question echoed louder than the sirens that morning. If corruption can live inside the Senate itself, who is truly guarding America's future and who is quietly helping to undermine it? The Meridian Syndicate did not rise from chaos. It was engineered with disciplined blood and a global network of operatives who understood power as a commodity. As analysts from Reuters and The Guardian later noted, the organization resembled a hybrid between a cartel, a paramilitary force, and a shadow intelligence service, one capable of infiltrating institutions rather than merely evading them. Its fingerprints stretched from the deserts of Sonora to Balkan weapons markets and private military camps formed in the wreckage of past conflicts. And at the center of its U.S. expansion stood Senator Marcus Hale, the man federal agents dragged from the Capitol the morning the nation woke up to its worst political betrayal in a decade. Hale had crafted a public image as a hardline defender of national security under President Donald Trump's intensified 2025 anti-crime directives. Yet while cameras captured him warning America about threats abroad, his private world told a darker story. Evidence uncovered by investigators, later verified by BBC and DW sources, showed that Hale didn't simply assist the Meridian Syndicate. He architected its American empire. He built relationships with former Sinaloa enforcers, coordinated logistics with Balkan arms traffickers, and maintained discreet ties to rogue military advisors cast out for war crimes. The syndicate's ruthlessness was legendary torture tapes used to control defectors, chemical incinerators hidden beneath safe houses, and a 2019 revenge massacre that left 22 dead. These were not street criminals. These were professionals of violence. The infrastructure revealed in the federal briefing went beyond anything the DEA had dismantled in the last 3 decades. 19 cross-border tunnels engineered with ventilation systems and reinforced shafts. 62 military-grade transport trucks registered under non-existent contractors. Night vision-equipped courier teams using encrypted comms more advanced than those of several small national armies. Brentwood-based intelligence researchers quoted by Al Jazeera compared the operation to a parallel security apparatus, one that shadowed U.S. federal processes without being detected. At the heart of this machinery was the Iron Corridor, the syndicate's clandestine highway pushing fentanyl, heroin, weapons, and cash into American cities with an efficiency that stunned policy analysts. Shipments entered border zones without inspection. Federal logs were altered or overwritten. Cameras along transit routes mysteriously malfunctioned. Every time a field agent raised concerns, interventions were blocked with the same authorization code, Hale 17A. It became a digital signature of corruption, an invisible stamp that told the system to look away. While the public saw Hale rallying for stronger borders, reinforcement of surveillance, and larger defense budgets, the Meridian Syndicate operated with near immunity. Defense News later reported that internal documents showed even federal counter-narcotics units were repeatedly denied resources whenever their assignments approached syndicate-linked territories. One request to inspect a suspected tunnel route was denied 32 times across 2 agencies. Another request to audit a suspicious contractor was delayed for over a year, only to be dismissed without explanation. The contradiction was glaring. How could a man celebrated as a national security hawk simultaneously command the most protected narcotics pipeline in U.S. history? Experts from Jane's Defense Weekly described the situation as a catastrophic failure of internal counterintelligence, warning that foreign rivals observing the scandal, particularly Russia and China, would interpret it as a signal of institutional weakness. When the guardians of a nation's security are corruptible enemies, do not need to breach defenses. The breach has already occurred. But the syndicate's internal cohesion was also its vulnerability. Once Hale's fingerprints hit federal custody, federal analysts began mapping the entire operation. The 14-month silent probe involving only 9 officials finally revealed the scale of the deception. Convoys crossing Arizona, New Mexico, and Illinois, believed by residents to be military training movements, were in fact hauling narcotics worth billions. What looked like routine cargo inspections were rerouted facilitation operations. What appeared to be legislative endorsements for defense logistics were coded approvals for drug shipments. The Meridian Syndicate had infiltrated the system so deeply that dismantling it would require the most extensive domestic strike since 9/11 Operation Fracture, a mission already mobilizing quietly in the shadows. And as the scope of the corruption became clearer, one haunting question grew harder to ignore. If a criminal empire can grow inside the machinery of government, how many other threats are waiting for the right politician to unlock the door? The moment Senator Hale's fingerprints entered federal custody, the second phase activated Operation Fracture. It was the largest coordinated domestic strike since 9/11, a mission so secret that fewer than a dozen officials had known it existed. As Reuters and BBC later confirmed, the objective was not to arrest street-level offenders. It was to dismantle a militarized narcotics empire that had embedded itself across 14 states. And before dawn broke, America saw scenes usually associated with counter-terrorism raids abroad, not inside its own borders. At 3 to 12 a.m. in El Paso, the first battle erupted. A fortified compound disguised as a trucking depot but reinforced like a warfighting outpost became the ignition point of the operation. FBI hostage rescue team units descended from helicopters under cover of darkness. DW's defense correspondents later reported that infrared drones circling above identified 16 armed guards equipped with military carbines, body armor, and encrypted radios. When the first flashbang detonated, the complex came alive with muzzle flashes slicing through the smoke. Gunfire ricocheted off shipping containers as tactical teams breached the warehouse, finding not auto parts but crates of suppressed weapons and industrial fentanyl drums bearing the Meridian emblem. The firefight at the entrance of a tunnel shaft ended within minutes, but the message was clear. This was not a cartel warehouse. This was a battlefield. Across the country, similar scenes unfolded. At 5:21 a.m., Phoenix erupted. A fentanyl conversion lab, masquerading as an auto parts facility, attempted to destroy itself with a chemical blast as agents breached the perimeter. According to The Guardian, the syndicate operator had already opened the ignition valve when federal teams tackled him seconds before detonation, preventing what officials described as an urban catastrophe. Inside temperature-controlled vats and chemical processors ran 24 hours a day, producing narcotics at a scale rivaling major foreign super labs. Hours later, northern Georgia became a war zone. The syndicate's main logistics hub, a sprawling web of trailers, warehouses, and disguised freight lanes, attempted a high-speed escape. Agents deployed spike systems, shredding tires of cartel trucks moving at dangerous speeds. Vehicles overturned into ditches, armed operatives scattered into wooded areas, and drones tracked fugitives hiding in refrigerated containers. BBC News noted the precision of the federal deployment, highlighting that President Donald Trump had authorized expanded multi-agency coordination earlier in 2025, allowing shareable intelligence streams that proved critical during the chase. By 8:03 a.m., the Iron Corridor, the secret artery that moved narcotics and weapons across the nation, collapsed. Federal forces seized 2.1 tons of narcotics, 412 weapons, and $380 million in assets. 143 operatives were taken into custody in just hours. It was the type of coordinated strike typically reserved for foreign insurgent groups, but this time the battlefield was American soil. Strategic analysts interviewed by Al Jazeera and Jane's Defense Weekly warned that the operation exposed a deeper, more alarming truth: U.S. national security had been compromised not by foreign adversaries, but by the corruption of its own systems. While tactical success demonstrated capability, the infiltration revealed vulnerability. If a criminal syndicate could build tunnels, command vehicles, deploy armed guards, and manipulate federal databases inside America's borders, then adversaries abroad from Russia to China would study this event as evidence that internal fractures are as dangerous as external threats. But the human impact is what resonated across communities. In Chicago, parents who buried sons and daughters lost to fentanyl watched live footage of raids dismantling the network responsible for their grief. In Phoenix, officers frustrated by years of blocked investigations finally saw the machinery that evaded them. In small towns along the corridor, the realization hit hard. The syndicate operated beneath their neighborhoods under their lawmakers' protection. Operation Fracture succeeded militarily, but America now faced a question with deeper consequences. If federal agents had to fight cartel forces on U.S. soil, how close had the nation come to losing control of its own security, and what other hidden networks might still be operating in the shadows? By late morning, Washington was no longer the capital of the world's most powerful democracy. It had become an emergency command center, struggling to understand the scale of its own internal collapse. What began as a single raid on Senator Marcus Hale had triggered a political earthquake that shook the foundations of government. Reuters described the atmosphere as borderline martial, with hallways locked down, offices sealed, and staffers interrogated as though Washington itself had become an active crime zone. The echo of one phrase repeated by FBI briefers chilled the Senate. This came from inside the institution. Inside a secure room, deep beneath the Capitol, leaders from both parties met under circumstances unprecedented in modern U.S. history. According to BBC and DW, the briefing lasted 9 hours. 9 hours of images, encrypted chats, shipping documents, forged signatures, and tunnel schematics projected across the room as stunned lawmakers tried to grasp how how a multi-billion-dollar narcotics empire had been permitted not just to grow, but to thrive inside their own chambers. Phones buzzed non-stop. Press aides ran down hallways carrying fragments of information they barely understood. Outside, journalists from The Guardian and The Washington Post gathered in swarms, sensing that the story unfolding inside those sealed walls would redefine national politics for a generation. As the morning progressed, panic spread within the Senate staff. 19 senior aides were detained on the spot. Computers were seized, hard drives cloned, years of emails and memos preserved before anyone could delete them. A classified memo leaked within minutes. Hale guarantees passage. Do not interfere. It detonated across social media like a political bomb. The language didn't suggest mere bribery. It suggested orchestration. It suggested knowledge. It suggested compliance. And compliance meant rot. The Guardian later summarized the mood with a stark headline: a government breach from within. The most devastating moment came at 1:27 p.m. when investigators opened a plain binder recovered from Hale's office, the Meridian Ledger. It was not a financial record, it was the operational brain of a criminal empire. 77 names, procurement officers, Senate assistants, logistics coordinators, inspectors, police chiefs, even former military advisors, each name paired with matched actions, shipments, rerouted cameras, disabled audits, delayed reports buried. The Meridian Syndicate had not infiltrated government, it had integrated itself into government operations. As DW analysts noted, America had long warned of foreign infiltration, Russian cyber units, Chinese influence networks, extremist cells. But the greatest breach of 2025, under President Donald Trump's renewed anti-crime agenda, came from something far more mundane and far more dangerous: institutional complicity. Strategists from Al Jazeera and Jane's Defense Weekly highlighted the geopolitical implications. Rival powers watch corruption scandals as closely as they watch missile tests. If cartels can buy influence inside the U.S. Senate, what message does that send to nations positioned against American interests? To Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran, this wasn't just a domestic scandal. It was evidence of a vulnerability they could exploit diplomatically and informationally. America's prestige, its claim to be a model of internal resilience, had taken a hit no military adversary could have delivered. But the political impact paled compared with the human one. Families in Chicago who had buried teenagers overdosed on fentanyl learned that Hale had approved the shipments. Community activists in El Paso, long dismissed as conspiracy theorists, now saw federal confirmation of the tunnels they suspected beneath their neighborhoods. Officers in Phoenix, frustrated by years of blocked investigations, finally understood why critical evidence always seemed to vanish before reaching the courts. The balance between national security and institutional trust had been shattered, and as lawmakers stared into the abyss of their own system's failure, one question hung over Washington like a storm cloud. If corruption can infect the very institutions meant to defend the nation, how long before another hidden network rises to exploit the vacuum, and will America recognize the threat in time? The unmarked binder, later known nationwide as the Meridian Ledger, became the single most damning document in modern American political history. When investigators opened it inside the secure briefing room, silence fell with the weight of a national tragedy. What appeared at first to be a simple black folder held something far more explosive than any narcotic shipment seized earlier that morning: a blueprint of corruption woven directly into the machinery of American governance. According to Reuters and BBC, the ledger contained 77 names officials across federal, state, and local levels. Not low-ranking facilitators, but strategic nodes, transportation inspectors, procurement officers, Senate aides with clearance access, city council members who controlled zoning police chiefs, who oversaw local interdictions, and former military advisors familiar with logistics and surveillance patterns. Each entry aligned with matched operational actions. A shipment rerouted, a checkpoint bypassed. Camera malfunction logged as routine, a drug inspection delayed until further notice. Every one of these adjustments, small on their own, combined into a flawless choreography that allowed the Meridian Syndicate to operate openly within an institution designed to prevent such exploitation. DW analysts compared the system to a parallel command structure, one indistinguishable from legitimate federal operations. It wasn't a case of bribery alone, it was systemic weaponization. Inspectors received payments disguised as consulting fees. Senate aides received encrypted orders masked as internal memos. Police chiefs saw budgetary incentives tied to community development programs that never existed. The ledger proved that the syndicate had hacked not America's borders, but America's bureaucratic arteries. What what shocked investigators most was not the breadth of corruption, it was the precision. Jane's Defense Weekly observed that many of the logistical maneuvers displayed military-level planning, convoys disguised as defense shipments, tunnels built using engineering specs similar to forward operating bases, courier teams equipped with night vision gear and encrypted radios capable of defeating standard FBI intercept protocols. These were not ad hoc criminals gaming the system. They were professionals using institutional knowledge to create a shadow supply chain invisible to the average citizen. As The Guardian reported, the Ledger's revelations forced Senate leaders to confront an unbearable truth: the system had not been bypassed. The system itself had been reprogrammed, and that collapse of trust carried enormous geopolitical consequences. With President Donald Trump asserting America's renewed strength on the world stage in 2025, adversaries such as Russia and China monitored the scandal closely. Corruption at this scale sends a message: a nation that cannot trust its institutions struggles to project power abroad. Strategic prestige is not only built on military might, it is built on governance integrity. Once the ledger became public, the ripple effect accelerated. Across 23 jurisdictions, federal officers executed hundreds of warrants. DW and Al Jazeera later reported that 641 bank accounts were frozen as part of the first sweep. 184 officials were indicted in the following days. Transportation divisions paused entire departments after identifying corrupted supervisors. Courts overturned rulings connected to compromised referrals, reopening cases that had been quietly buried. Hospitals and schools discovered unexplained budget delays tied directly to ledger-listed officials who had siphoned federal allocations into the syndicate's financial network. Communities felt the betrayal viscerally. Parents in Chicago, already devastated by rising fentanyl deaths, saw documents proving that inspections meant to catch contaminated shipments had been intentionally disabled. Activists in border regions who had long warned of underground tunnels were finally validated. Officers in Phoenix discovered that pursuit logs had been falsified by individuals sworn to support their work. Every revelation deepened a national wound, the realization that those meant to protect citizens were instead complicit in poisoning them. Strategic analysts emphasized that the Meridian Ledger represented more than criminal evidence. It represented a mirror held up to the American system. It exposed how vulnerable institutions become when trust erodes, when oversight falters, and when loyalty can be purchased at a price. In a year already marked by global instability, from Europe's escalating tensions to intensifying US-China rivalry, the scandal served as a blueprint of what foreign intelligence services dream of: achieving internal decay that requires no invasion. As the ledger's implications spread through the public consciousness, a chilling question formed. If 77 officials could quietly reshape national systems for a criminal empire, how many more vulnerabilities remain undiscovered, and what future threat might already be exploiting them? The collapse of the Meridian Syndicate was swift, violent, and tactically decisive, but repairing the trust it shattered would prove far more difficult. As news of the ledger spread across the nation, America confronted a reality: even global adversaries had failed to impose a fracture within the very institutions sworn to safeguard the country. According to Reuters and DW, the DOJ's rapid actions, hundreds of warrants, suspended divisions, emergency audits were necessary, but they were not enough to heal the deeper wound exposed by the scandal. When corruption blooms inside systems designed to prevent it, the damage spreads far beyond the crime scenes. It seeps into public faith. It contaminates the national psyche. Across the country, communities reeled as the scale of the infiltration emerged. In Chicago, families mourning loved ones lost to fentanyl overdoses watched press conferences explaining that clearance codes signed by Senator Hale himself had permitted contaminated shipments to enter their neighborhoods. In Phoenix, police departments discovered years of altered pursuit logs. Reports they once trusted had been manipulated by officials now revealed as syndicate collaborators. El Paso residents, who spent years raising alarms about suspicious tunnels beneath industrial zones, finally saw their claims validated in the federal evidence released. These were not isolated mistakes. They were systemic betrayals that touched lives on every rung of society. The Guardian reported a surge of public anger, not just at the criminals, but at the institutions that allowed them to operate. Trust once eroded requires more than policy adjustments. It requires transparency, accountability, and a national reckoning. And under President Donald Trump's 2025 administration, that reckoning became a political imperative. Trump issued a statement calling the scandal a wake-up call for a nation facing unprecedented internal threats, emphasizing that America's borders can be fortified, but the real battle is inside the institutions guarding them. As analysts from Al Jazeera and BBC pointed out, the scandal struck at a crucial moment in global politics. With rising tensions between the US, China, and Russia, the American government needed to project stability and strategic coherence. Instead, adversaries watched as the world's strongest democracy grappled with an internal breach that compromised military logistics, transportation controls, and legislative integrity. For rival powers, this was an intelligence victory without firing a shot, an example of how internal division can rupture a superpower's image on the world stage. Jane's Defense Weekly noted that while Operation Fracture dismantled an elaborate criminal empire, it simultaneously exposed a blueprint for how such networks could rise again if oversight weakens. The Meridian Syndicate had exploited blind spots across bureaucratic layers, from transportation inspections to Senate offices, from local zoning boards to national security protocols. The lesson was unmistakable. America's strength does not depend solely on aircraft carriers, advanced weapons, or fortified borders. It depends on the incorruptibility of the institutions that manage them. The human impact continued to ripple outward. Hospitals reviewing unexplained funding gaps discovered diversions tied to corrupted officials. Schools found grant delays linked to individuals on the ledger. City councils learned that infrastructure projects were intentionally stalled to facilitate syndicate operations. Trust in leadership plummeted as ordinary citizens questioned how many more hidden networks might already exist. And yet within the crisis, an uncomfortable truth emerged, one that security analysts across DW Reuters and The Guardian echoed: the betrayal was preventable. Red flags existed for years: anonymous complaints, mysterious log alterations, unexplained denials of investigations. But the system, conditioned to trust its own hierarchy, dismissed the signals until the evidence became undeniable. As the DOJ concluded in its final report, drugs do not enter a nation through borders alone. They enter through silence. That sentence reverberated through Senate chambers, newsrooms, and community halls. It forced America to confront an uncomfortable question: if silence enabled this network, what other dangers hide in the gaps between oversight and obedience? Now the nation stands at a crossroads. Security and freedom depend on vigilance, but not just against external adversaries. The true threat may come from those who already hold the keys to the system. Restoring trust will require more than arrests. It will require transparency, accountability, and a willingness to question the very structures that define American governance. And as the country looks toward the future, one question lingers, a question that every citizen must consider. If this scandal remained hidden for years, what else remains unseen? And will America act before the next shadow network steps into the void? The Meridian Syndicate scandal became one of the most consequential internal breaches in modern American history. What began with a dawn raid on Senator Marcus Hale unraveled into a nationwide reckoning that exposed a criminal empire embedded deep within U.S. institutions. Federal agents discovered fentanyl, heroin, and millions in cash inside a Senate office, evidence that the pipeline poisoning American communities had been protected from within the Capitol itself. 14 months of covert investigation culminated in Operation Fracture, the largest domestic enforcement action since 9/11. Across multiple states, militarized compounds, drug tunnels, logistics hubs, and conversion labs were dismantled within hours. But the true shock arrived with the Meridian Ledger, a binder listing 77 officials who enabled the syndicate's operations by altering inspections, manipulating databases, and burying reports. Reuters, BBC, DW, and The Guardian highlighted the scandal carried profound strategic implications. While President Donald Trump emphasized national strength in 2025, America's greatest vulnerability proved to be internal decay, not foreign adversaries. Communities learned their loss, and suffering were amplified by officials sworn to protect them. The DOJ's final warning echoed: nationwide corruption is not an external threat alone. It thrives when institutions fall silent. America now faces a defining test. Will vigilance replace silence before the next hidden network emerges?